Last time we talked about passive abilities, and now we will discuss active or special abilities. But before that, I would like you to be familiar with the following: unlocking, cooldown, and effect duration. Being aware of these things will help you to decide when to attack or retreat. So this is unlocking. It shows how many turns before you can use a special ability after a phobie is summoned. If there's nothing indicated here, that means you can use your special ability right away. And this one is cooldown. It shows how many turns to wait before you can use the ability again. If there's nothing indicated here, that means you can use your special ability every turn. And lastly is the effect duration. It specifies how many turns the ability effect will last on the affected target. Also, before I forgot, please be informed that at the time of recording, these are the only special abilities available. That's why if they will add more in the future, it won't be here. Okay? Alright. Let's start with the displacement abilities. There are currently 4 types: push, pull, teleport, and swap. The push literally just pushes an enemy unit 1 tile away while dealing damage to it. On the other hand, the pull ability pulls an enemy unit 1 tile closer while also dealing damage to the enemy. Then we have the teleport. It can move an enemy unit within range to an unoccupied tile adjacent to your unit. Lastly, we have the swap, where it causes your unit to swap places with an enemy unit within range. And that's all for the displacement abilities. Let's move on to fire! With this ability, you can deal damage and set an enemy unit's tile on fire! Any phobies that will stay on fire tile at the end of their turn will receive fire damage. Another thing about fire is that it can melt ice for 1 round. And speaking of ice, the next ability is freeze. With this, you can freeze an enemy unit, and frozen units cannot move or attack. So next is buff. It can be used to a friendly phobie and increase its damage for the current turn. On the other hand, we have debuff. It can be used on an enemy unit to reduce their damage for a couple of turns. Then we have the healer phobies. They heal and or cure poison from friendly non-undead units. We also have Leech Boost, which is for undead only. It boosts the health leech of undead units by 30% for 2 turns. Next is the poison ability. It inflicts damage to a non-mechanical unit over time. However, it can be cured by healer phobies or healing spa. We also have the disease ability. It also inflicts damage to a non-mechanical unit, but the effect is permanent and it cannot be cured. Now let's move on to Terrorform. It's an ability to create and or destroy an obstacle. A created obstacle has health points and can be destroyed by receiving damage. Created obstacles can block enemy line of sight attacks as well as yours, but it can be used to initiate targeted AoE attacks. So next we have Petrify. It's an ability to transform into stone. So basically, making yourself hard, making it immovable, undamageable, and untargetable. It will last for 3 rounds and will come back to normal state at the beginning of the enemy's turn. That's very important, so take note of that. Then we have the Mad ability. Mads disable a map tile, and disable terrain has no effect. So that means that fire is put out, traps cannot be set off, healing spa can't heal, and panic points are disabled. But it retained the team ownership. Let's talk about the abilities that can quote-unquote alter the phobie stats for a certain time. So first in line, we have the ability to remove one action. It reduces an enemy unit's action per turn by 1. So instead of having the usual number 2 right here, we can only see 1. Then we have the disable movement ability. It prevents an enemy unit from moving. However, they can still use their 2 actions to do other stuff like placing a trap or attacking. We also have an ability to increase movement range of a friendly unit by 1 tile for 1 turn. Then there's also an ability to disable damage where friendly and enemy units within range and line of sight lose the ability to deal damage. But keep in mind that passive and special abilities are still activated and can be activated respectively. Also, the poison, disease, traps, and fire will still deal damage. Only the attack damage is disabled. Okay? So lastly, we have the ability to reset a cooldown timer of an enemy unit's special ability to its maximum amount of time. And it can only be used against enemies with special abilities. Enough with that, let's move on to some more unique abilities. So first is the ability to control an enemy unit. Whereas you can start controlling the enemy after the turn you converted it. But remember, it is controllable for limited turns only. Next, we have the invisibility, where it makes your Phobies invisible to your enemy's POV. But if an enemy unit ends their turn on the same tile as your unit will die. First attack while invisible deals increased damage. Then, they will become visible after they land their first attack. And then their following attack will be the normal damage they have. So next is the Key Master. This ability grants player an extra key to spend by taking it from their reserve pool. It doesn't create a new key. At the end, you'll have 1 key less. Of course, you also have the Burrow. It's an ability to move and bypass all obstacles and unit in the way within 4 tile range. But keep in mind that it cannot bypass Abyss. Then we have the Force Field ability. It places a shield on a friendly unit that nullifies any 2 hits, be it attack or ability. And after getting hit twice by either attack or ability, the shield will break and the protection will be gone. Lastly, we have the Smokey Stokey. It creates an area of smoke that is 1 tile wide from the epicenter where it is cast. And all phobies that will stay in it, regardless if it is a friendly or enemy unit, will receive 50% less damage. And this apparently stacks with Tiny Tim's passive ability. Okay, now let's move on to abilities that can deal direct damages. First, let's start with the most basic one, which is Monty. We all know that it deals more damage to an enemy unit. So let's move on right away to the charge ability, whereas it allows a melee phobie to jump closer to its target while also dealing damage to it. Then have self-initiated AoE attacks. It damages all enemy units directly adjacent to it. All enemy units 1 or 2 tiles away within line of sight are dealt damage. On the other hand, we have targeted AoE attacks. It deals damage to a targeted enemy unit. Next is line attack. This ability can target an enemy whose tiles form a straight line with your tile. Enemy units are damaged as well as those units behind. Then we have the Explosion Gang, who destroy themselves in order to deliver damage to all adjacent enemy units. Next is Get a Light. This attaches a bomb to an enemy up to 2 tiles away, and after a certain amount of time, it automatically detonates, dealing full damage to the enemy with the bomb attached and 50% of that damage to all adjacent enemy units. Then we have the Dash ability, which allows a phobie to move through an enemy unit's tiles or empty tiles to an unoccupied tile 3 range away. All enemy units moved through are damaged in the process. Take note that the pathfinding prioritizes enemy tiles over empty tiles. And lastly, we have the ability to place traps. Traps can be set off at the end of any turn by an enemy unit, except the turn your trap is laid. We will have an in-depth discussion about traps next time. And I think that's enough for special abilities. Let me know what you want to know in the next chapter. But for now, congrats! You are one step closer to being a Phobies master. So, that's pretty much it for now. Thank you for watching. I will see you in your dreams. Bye-bye!